Hello and welcome back to Inquisitor Martyr. Last time we ended up fighting some of the Eldar, and now we get to go back down to the planet we were on and deal with the Eldar more, but by blowing up Wraith Lords using the Crimson Wanderer.
Your directive is quite straightforward, pilot. You must destroy those Wraith Lords. That is all.
What a glorious day! I've never had the chance to match weapons with Eldari combat walkers.
Your arrogance will be your downfall. There are 3 of those Xenos Knights on the battlefield.
Those constructs are so nimble and so graceful that even I cannot but marvel at their beauty. Still, they have no chance against good, sturdy Imperial plasteel.
If I can get off the planet I was stuck on.
Update for you, pilot.
I am listening, dear sir.
The Wraith Lords seem to be currently on patrol duty, and their pathways cross several times. Plan your route carefully, otherwise you could stumble upon 2 of them simultaneously.
2 Eldari constructs against the Crimson Wanderer. That would be a sight to see.
But, since last episode, because of how I schedule recording, I ended up missing out on more info on the Leagues of Votann. Most specifically, we got info on their basic infantry, the Hearthkin. Now, I don't know how many of you care specifically about the tabletop stat breakdowns, so I'm gonna do this as simply as possible, because, you know, if you don't care, you don't care. But this still gives you an idea of, potentially in lore, how their strength ranking should fall, or where they should fall within strength rankings. Their basic Hearthkin Warriors have a tabletop stat line that is just under a Space Marine. They get an inch less of movement, only 1 wound as opposed to 2, and they get a plus 4-up save for attacks. That's it. That is quite literally a little below a Space Marine. Their commander unit, the Thane, is roughly the same but gets 2 wounds and a little bit higher in a few other stats, but the main thing is just the 2 wounds being the big difference, so a more or less Space Marine equivalent. Not completely, but close enough. The other interesting thing is their unit size is up to 20 models. So you can have a squad of 20 dwarves just rolling up on someone. And that's pretty good, considering 20 guys who are just under Space Marine strength going after someone. That's pretty substantial. But then going along with that, we actually got... This was actually a couple days ago now. There was also a reveal for the Hernkin Pioneer. Essentially a scout unit that is on a hover bike. Which is pretty cool. It's... Because it's effectively a tricycle, it's a nice throwback to the old squat combat trikes that they had, except the new version they have 3 hover plates, but it's not the same kind that the Space Marines have. The Primaris Marines specifically. Think of these more like... this is going to be a real specific thing, but if you know... This kind of puts an age on me a bit, but old slide projectors, how they'd have the big disc on top that you'd slot all the slides in, and it would rotate. It looks like that, but pointing down. And it's one on the front pointing down, and then two on the back pointing down and out to create kind of a tricycle positioning for these hover generators, hover emitters, whatever you'd like to call them. But the driver seems to be using an older bolt gun. So from that you can kind of guess, not every member, every squat, we'll just label it as that as squats still, but not every squat has like high-end new tech. Some of them seem to still be using, to some degree, older Imperial tech, or at least older pattern weaponry. Which I think is a really interesting way of doing it, because instead of just being like, oh, they've got all new stuff, it's more of this feel of, hey, some other guys have gotten newer developments, but not all squats have new gear. You know, they're making do with old Imperial tech they had before they had lost contact however long ago. And I think that's neat. It also allows, I think, for a bit more build diversity, because you can probably rock bolt guns, and I would assume some degree of las weapons as kind of a cheaper alternative, and then pull out whatever super fancy guns that they haven't really ID'd yet as a new thing. Looking at the Hearthkin Warrior, it does look like a bolt gun though. It's not a current pattern, but it looks like just kind of a more reasonable build. It's blocky, but less flat out blocky. You know, it's not like some of these las weapons and some of these bolt guns that are just like, yeah, it's a brick with a tube on the end. Even though I can, realistically, based on how much weaponry the Empire needs, and the lack of, you know, customization, per se, I could see that being a thing of like, hey, just shove everything into the smallest possible box, put a stock on it, put a trigger, and go. Because you don't... The Empire's not exactly how well equipped and how comfortable the weapons are. Their goal is, does it shoot? Does it make an enemy on the opposite end of the gun die? You know, short of that, it's all kind of up in the air.
We have the up-to-date Arga information. The vicinity of the ruins is swarming with Tuathal Eldari.
At least the Crimson Wanderer took care of the potential reinforcements.
The Elder will pose a considerable threat. Have you thought about deploying Sir Caradoc again?
I cannot risk the safety of the artifact by sending in a war machine, the most devastating weaponry in the entire system.
Noted. The Tech Priest is trying to scan the area for further information.
I'm on my way to the ruins. Contact when the Tech Priest is finished with the scans.
I do wonder with the dwarves, the squads, how their squads are going to play, because the little tidbit that went along with their stat line is saying like, oh, they like to be up close. And I was like, okay, there's probably going to be some kind of shotgun equip option for them. But what are we going to see? Because these guys are effectively tougher Imperial Guard. Far tougher Imperial Guard. But I'm wondering, are we going to see, you know, a lot of setup teams? Are they going to be... See, I don't know if they'd reasonably be hit and run.
Is that I still have no idea why you're assisting me at all.
Why do you care?
Because I feel like setup teams would be a reasonable thing.
That will one day awaken a
you know,
god.
introduce a mortar team, introduce
You have failed.
probably, you know, a tank destroyer kind of deal. You know, your standard Imperial Guard fare. Because I'm just... The 20-man thing just has me really kind of caught on that. Because they have to have short range. If you're going to be running that many guys, you can't give them super long-range weapons, or you are going to have absolute firing lines, just melting guys. So it's like, okay, what's their range gonna look like? It's gonna have to be shorter than a Space Marine. But then it's like, okay, where do these guys fall in? Because with a worse movement speed than a Space Marine, it's going to make it tougher for them to get stuck in.
Your battle awaits.
You let me fight your
And
battle.
if that's their optimum range, you're going to want to get them there quickly.
The Tauthor might see me as almost as alien as you do, but I will not.
I don't know,
fight
there's
my own
a
people.
lot that
I
we
was
haven't
not
been told yet.
referring to that
I
battle
mean,
zone.
considering we have stats for 2 units and a picture of a 3rd unit's model, there's a lot we can still look forward to for sure. I wonder if they'll get Baneblades. I'd like to see them get a Baneblade or Baneblade equivalent. I also saw there was a Chaos Knight box set available, which if you bought the equivalent Imperial Knight parts or units, it would cost you like $300, but the set is, I think, 100 and something. Still expensive, but I mean, it's an Imperial Knight and 2 smaller ones. I can't remember the name of them. I always forget Imperial Knights are a faction. When I see giant stompy mech units, I immediately go into, oh, that's probably something for AdMech. Since I've grown to associate the Adeptus Mechanicus with all that kind of stuff. I was also watching, it was Angry Joe, him and some of his friends and co-hosts were playing 40K, doing like the smallest map with, I don't even know if it was like an 800 point army or something, but they were doing a little in-house tournament between them, and at the time the Tyranid Codex hadn't come out, and by the time the championship had happened, they finally got the Tyranid Codex for 9th edition, and it was, using 8th edition Tyranid's Codex, that was absurd. One of the guys, Ray, he had, I can't remember what unit it was, it got nerfed hard in the latest Codex, because it ignored cover and just could shoot anybody. Now it got changed to needing like a spotter, synapse connection, and a few, like, I think it's both of those are like the synapse counts as a spotter kind of deal. But it got nerfed. The damage was like a 1 to 3, and it got nerfed to flat 2, which... I mean, I wouldn't even call that a nerf, that's more of evening out the damage. But it was the dumbest thing, because the opening volley, he was just shooting cross-map into the enemy. I was like, what is this? That's so dumb.
Expedition. But I am an Inquisitor. I will not fail.
You are not allowed to fail. Just yet. You have the living, breathing key to the prophecy.
Things like that kind of surprise. I mean, it surprises me that Games Workshop would allow that stuff, but in the same vein, it makes sense. Because depending on when that codex came out in 8th edition, if it was a later edition, you need it to challenge the current meta at the time. It just happens to be, you know, when you rebalance everything and do a new edition, what was meant to counter the old meta, when a new meta has come in, can potentially be game-breaking. Which admittedly is kind of my complaint when it comes to how the factions are balanced.
Highly irregular energy signature located.
And how does that help me exactly?
Because I feel like the books should all come out at the same time. You know, do your chapter approved for smaller changes, but every, you know, codex should launch at the same time. Yes, it's going to be a lot more difficult, but this way, within the existing framework, it's balanced. Because otherwise you're trying to... You're looking at an existing set of, like, teams, saying, okay, who's the most powerful? Okay, well, we need to some degree, stop them if they're dominating. So you try to rebalance everything. It reminds me of what happens in Destiny, how they've even said that their balancing is less of actual balance and more of rotating what weapon category gets preferential treatment for the season. Because I remember reading that a while back with an interview with some of the, like, sandbox guys. They're like, oh yeah, you know, at a certain point it becomes hand cannons time in the sun, so we buff hand cannons, and then it'll go to pulse rifles, or scout rifles, or assault rifles. I'm like, this is in balance. This is selective buffing and nerfing. There's no balance here, and that's kind of the problem I see with 40k, is you're not balancing as much as just bumping something up to try to knock down the current high. Helmet kind of looks like Archaon the Everchosen's helmet. But yeah, I don't like poor balancing efforts. I feel like they just hurt games more than they help them. But I guess from a... Wow, I died instantly. From a game, like a business standpoint, it makes sense. If you're Games Workshop, you'll want a semblance of balance, but you can't care too much, because in the end, if a new faction or a weak faction suddenly becomes top, the people who didn't have those miniatures, if they want to be competitive, are going to have to go buy them. And that's free money. Which sucks. I will admit that.
Sergeant.
Are you serious? I was... Bravo, Inquisitor. My only...
I knew.
I have. This is not a.
I sus.
The announcement.
I was expecting at least some assistance from you.
It was your battle to fight, not mine.
And now you talk like the Harlequin. How are you feeling?
It is difficult to explain. My will is...
It is most
Alright, and that is all for now. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit the like button. It helps out the channel a lot. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit the subscribe button. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.